Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, Larsers. Hello, Bread into Toast. Hello, Punky Gal. Hello, Erica. Hello, Ms. Milena. Hello. Hello, Rock Oka. Hello, Joanna Whitaker. Hello. Hey, Salmon Moose. Hello, Sweet Myths Music. We back. And folks, the intro music today brought to you as per usual by Slam House. Go give them a little subscribe, and like their video. Most secret stream of all night streams, indeed. Indeed. Hey, Fenry. Yeah, we're doing a little unexpected stream. I couldn't exactly fall asleep, so figured I'd come back and say howdy, and maybe we'd finish that Alex Jones interview, or I think maybe we'll do the Democratic candidate debate response from TYT. We didn't cover that last time. How y'all doing? Hello and goodbye. Goodbye. Hey, Midnight Null Night. Family cat sleeping next to me. Dad closed his door. The cat likes to sleep next to Dad. Gotcha. Feel like I should have known there was a Dem debate. There wasn't. They canceled the Democratic primary in a few states, and they were really salty. Marianne Williamson and Cenk were really salty about it, so TYT hosted a mini Dem forum debate thing. Yeah, so we'll go over that. I don't think it will have any impact on the wider primary. So it's mostly just for funsies. Biden needs to run, and T should be in home detention. T? I don't know what that means. Or Tucker, maybe? Why web design is not important. Yeah. Boop, 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 beep, boop, boop, boop. Nice to have you here, folks. And I'm not tired, but I am tired, you know? So I might be a little bit loopy this stream. Hope y'all don't mind too much. So here we go. We're gonna start off with the Democratic. Well, I'll leave it to you guys. Just show of hands. Do you guys want to finish the Tucker Carlson X Alex Jones interview, or do you want to do the Democratic TYT forum debate thing? Trump should be in detention. Yes. Please God, no more Tucker. Yeah, I think we might have gotten as much content out of that as we're gonna get. Hey, Sheppy Hand. The hours demanded of streamers is fairly hard. Yeah, I mean, I stream generally like 120 plus hours a month. You know? Plus all of the off-screen time. You could say everyone's tuckered out. True. Well played. All right. Here we go. We're going to do the Democratic primary, but I'm going to play RimWorld while we do it. And you guys can't stop me. Wahahaha. Here we go. Let's make the debate small. Hey, RimWorld. Can we watch both with you? Small debate, big RimWorld? Indeed. We're going to do a little bit of gaming. Wonder if I can... I size it appropriately here. Maybe we can just there we go. Perfect.
Welcome to TYT's continuing election coverage, perhaps the final election coverage, depending on how the 2024 general election goes. Stay tuned to find out. But tonight on our coverage, we are going to be hosting the Democratic presidential candidates to respond to tonight's Republican debate. And we are very proud as a network to be the first to bring together all of the contenders at the same place at the same time. And we want to point out that we did invite President Joe Biden, but as unfortunately been the trend, he and the Democratic establishment seem to prefer that this primary be silent if it has to occur at all. But I don't think that silence is good for democracy, so we've decided to give our microphone to the candidate.
Oh no, it's so shocking that Biden wouldn't show up to this. Oh no. Thank God RFK isn't there. Well, RFK is running officially as an independent, so he wouldn't show up for the Dem primary.
And now let's welcome those candidates. Marianne Williamson is an American author and speaker. Welcome, Marianne.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Good to be speaking with you once again. Representative Gene Phillips is a businessman who has represented Minnesota's 3rd congressional district since 2019. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody.
Good to have you here. Cenk Uygur is a political commentator, host of The Young Turks, and author. Cenk, it is good to meet you for the first time ever.
All right, good to be here.
Good to have you here. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing tonight. This is not a debate. This is a forum. We are hoping to bring together all of the contenders to get an idea of what they think about politics and exchange of ideas. And to that end, because there's a lot that we're going to be talking about, we would ask that all of you try to be concise in your answers to make sure that we can cover as many important topics as possible. And with that said, I want to start off with sort of the context that this forum occurs in. We just had the 4th Republican debate. There will likely be more. And yet on the Democratic side, no debates. Is that a big loss for democracy? Is it a loss for the Democratic Party? Marianne, I want to start with you. What do you think about this?
It's a big loss, and we have something worse going on now than just the fact that we don't have debates. We have the fact that in Florida and possibly in some other states as well, there's some, as I'm sure Cenk and Dean are aware, there's some funny stuff going on in Tennessee and in North Carolina. I'm thinking of it now as Ballotgate. So we have a bigger problem than even the fact that they're not having debates. And that's that there is a concerted effort by Democratic parties around the country to make sure that Joe Biden is basically the only person running, even to the point of excluding us from the ballots. And that's a very big deal. And yes, it's a threat to our democracy.
Representative?
And for me, well, my goodness, how can you have the 2 leading candidates right now, which is going to change, by the way, hopefully on both sides of the aisle, literally not agreeing to debate? It's just absurd. Donald Trump not showing up for a GOP debate. It is not, there's not even an incumbent GOP president right now. And I think it's more than anything sad, and a sad commentary on the Democratic Party and sadly on Joe Biden, that he would, before he even knew who might be running in this primary, would say there would be no debates. And as a Democrat, a proud one, I know I'm with other ones here on this Zoom tonight. If debate dies, democracy dies. It's as simple as that. It's appalling, but I'm glad to be with all of you. And we're going to show people not just how to debate, but how to do it respectfully and in a way that I think America is demanding.
Cenk, what do you think?
Yeah, first I want to say something about Marianne and Dean. Marianne Williamson has been in this race longer than anybody. Showed tremendous courage by getting in from the beginning. And then Dean coming in when he did was also huge. It brought more attention to the weakness of Joe Biden, and he did it while taking on huge parts of the Democratic establishment that were very unhappy for him doing that. I think he showed tremendous courage on both of their parts, and I want to commend them for that. Now, unfortunately for Joe Biden, we haven't seen that kind of courage. I guess he's worried about us because it's not just that he doesn't debate us. And come on, I mean, we see his thing. I'm sorry, but he couldn't. And
he's not worried about you. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, it's the same way that Trump isn't really worried about debating like the other people in the Republican primary. Like, oh yeah, there was a 4th Republican primary debate that we haven't actually watched yet, which I was thinking we might watch it after this, just for funsies. Cenk is actually following through on running, yes, it's a hilariously terrible campaign. He has a website and it looks bad, and I've made fun of it multiple times, and I don't feel the need to do it again. But also, again, Biden is not like deciding not to debate out of fear. The same way Trump isn't deciding not to debate out of fear. Trump's deciding not to debate because he doesn't need to debate any of his opponents. He has nothing to gain from doing so.
And if you're worried that he can't withstand a debate with us, how's he going to do against Donald Trump? But more importantly, as Marianne pointed out, now Florida's just canceled their election. Look, we all got into this race because we're worried to death that Donald Trump is going to end democracy as we know it. And he now is bragging about wanting to be a dictator. So the Democratic Party ending elections in the primaries is an epic disaster. It's a disaster for the Democratic voters, it's a disaster for the process, and a disaster for our prospects in the general election. How are you going to make the case that Donald Trump is endangering democracy when you're canceling elections across the country? Now North Carolina and Tennessee has taken all three of us off the ballot as well. It's outrageous, it's indefensible, and it's not what the Democratic Party should stand for.
And I'd like to remind our audience, as we often have, that when you don't have contested, vigorous primaries, sure, maybe you protect the incumbent at least through the primary process, but you don't have a period of driving news, of getting people fired up, getting people talking about politics in these different states, and that almost certainly has lingering effects for the general election. But I want to jump onto something that Representative Phillips mentioned there, that you not only have Biden opting out of the debates, but as Representative Phillips mentioned, Trump also isn't getting involved. So I want to jump to our first bit of video from the debate where Chris Christie pointed out how weird it was that in these debates, they're basically pretending that it doesn't matter that Trump isn't there.
It's often very difficult to be the only person on the stage who's telling the truth, and the only person who is taking on what needs to be taken on. I look at my watch now. We're 17 minutes into this debate, and except for your little speech in the beginning, we've had these three acting as if the race is between the four of us. The fifth guy, who doesn't have the guts to show up and stand here, he's the one who, as you just put it, is way ahead in the polls. The fact is that when you go and you say the truth about somebody who is a dictator, a bully, who has taken shots at everybody, I'm in this race because the truth needs to be spoken. He is unfit. This is a guy who just said this past week that he wants to use the Department of Justice to go after his enemies when he gets in there. I mean, the fact of the matter is, he is unfit to be president, and there is no bigger issue in this race, Megyn, than Donald Trump, and those numbers prove it.
So as we've been saying, Joe Biden doesn't want to have debates, doesn't want in many of these states to have a primary at all, despite saying that he got into this race to stop Donald Trump. He's not taking the opportunity to get the cameras on him, talk about Trump and all of that. And Trump doesn't feel like he has to show up. But I want to start with you, Representative Phillips, first on this. As of right now, Biden is still leading, and Trump is also leading. So is this a problem of the candidates, or is this a problem of the electorate, that we don't seem to have high enough standards for our candidates, that we expect that they should at least try to sell us on them?
Actually, I think this is a problem of two parties, and I think it's becoming self-evident to those of us here on the Zoom tonight. But I don't think it's evident enough yet to the country that they're being played by a duopoly that is literally suffocating democracy. Sadly, I thought it was only a disease of the right, as I know Marianne has discovered earlier than I, and Bernie Sanders before us. It's actually a disease that's afflicting the left as well. And I think we have to expose it. Look forward to working together to do so. I've discovered also that the electorate is desperate. They're hungry, starving for debate. But they're not going to get it from the two parties. The two parties are actually working against it. And look, from my perspective, when 70-some% of the country wants neither Joe Biden nor Donald Trump to be the two nominees, and only one member of Congress out of 535 people, which is me, is willing to say that quiet part out loud, that's all that you need to know about the disconnect between the electorate and the representatives. We have a perverse incentive system. It is corrupt. I'm finding more out by the day. And that's why I'm glad we're doing this. And I think we should all work together. And it's not just Democrats. The leading candidates should debate, period. It should be a basic expectation, a qualification to even enter the presidential stage, period. And it's enough of the nonsense. Doesn't matter your politics. It's a principle.
And it certainly seems like something that had always been a part of the tradition. And we know, based on recent polling, 68% say inside of the Democratic Party they want televised debates. Cenk, I want to go to you next. What do you think about this?
Yeah. So look, obviously we should debate. I think that, and if we do, Dean is right, Marianne's right. What we would do is talk about how terrible Trump is, for example.
The thing is, like, debate is good. I'm on their side here. It's just what is frustrating to me is the lack of acknowledgement that their position, like this, frankly, if I'm gonna be honest with you guys, comes across as a bit Jeb-like. Okay, it comes across as like very, I don't know, deluded. Like, oops, all Cenk. It's oh look, he it's a clean sweep. Just like that's the vibe I get off of this. And like, it's just that we have 3 Jebs this time. But like, they're also correct about their position here. Like, there should be a debate anyway, but still.
So not only did he say he'd be dictator on day one, but he shared an article from the Washington Post that said that he would become a dictator. He shared it favorably. Hey, look at this, guys, I'm gonna be a dictator. It's unbelievable. He said that immigrants were poisoning the blood of our nation. That is a direct Hitler quote. So he's gonna, and Kash Patel and Steve Bannon were on their show the other day saying, we're not kidding. They're gonna take political prisoners. They are saying that they're going to arrest their opponents in politics and in media, and they have not laid out any specific charges. In other words, we don't care that they didn't do anything wrong. They dared to criticize Donald Trump. We're going to arrest them. This is a massive, massive danger to our democracy. This is not a normal election. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is hiding. Look, whether you're debating us or you're out there on the stump making the case, you've got to show up if you're going to be the candidate. And he hasn't even showed up. That's why his favorability is at 37. His unfavorability is at 59. He's 22 points underwater. He's
almost 69. That would have been nice.
13 points lower than a generic Democrat, which the 3 of us or any other Democrat would fill that slot. 13 points lower. He's losing to Donald Trump, who is a deeply unpopular politician who says he wants to be dictator. He's losing to Trump in the last poll by 8 points. And the Democratic candidate must win by 5 in order to win the Electoral College. Then there's that number again, Joe Biden down by 13. And when you're down by 13, you need to be in front of every camera fighting like hell to come back. Does it look like Joe Biden's trying to make a comeback? No, he's constantly taking a nap in a cave somewhere, in a bunker. And what does he do? He sends out his minions to stop elections in the primaries, stop debates, stop any discussion. Well, then we're not getting our message out. We as Democrats, you should be joining us in fighting Trump and fighting like hell to represent Democratic voters. Do you see any of that energy and gumption from Joe Biden? Honestly, he barely can finish sentences. Look, guys, if you could, I don't mind if people are angry with me for saying things that are obviously.
Yeah, again, the framing here is Cenk attempting to try and frame it as Biden's a weak old coward who can't be bothered to come out and fight the good fight. But like, I don't know, but Biden's got other things he needs to do right now. The thing I will say is that it is true that Biden, like, I would prefer someone younger than Biden. I think most voters would, but almost no voters see any of these 3 candidates as viable alternatives to Biden.
True. You ask anyone in your private life, what do you think of Joe Biden? Every single one of them is going to say he's too old. But yet the Democratic Party is supporting this leader who's acting in authoritarian ways is saying, we're okay with losing democracy. We're okay with losing this election to Donald Trump as long as we don't offend Joe Biden. Well, the 3 of us don't agree, and I think that Joe Biden needs to actually make his case to the American people, and he hasn't even done that against us or Trump.
Marian, I know you've been very critical of the lack of debates and what they're doing at the primaries. You started off talking about that. Is this just fear from Biden? Is it apathy? Is it entitlement? Is it disrespect for the democratic process? Why have we ended up with the sort of democratic primary or lack thereof that there is right now?
First of all, it's exactly what Cenk said. It's that the president doesn't feel he needs to say anything because he knows that he has a machine that's taking care of business for him. And that's a problem. And that is the DNC and how the whole party operates in state after state after state, making sure we're not on the ballots, making sure that we're not debating the president, et cetera. And everything that Cenk said was true. We need to be out there talking about our counter narrative to the Republicans. We need to talk about what the Democrats stand for in 2024. What does Biden say other than finish the job? But there's something else as well. And that's a sort of disturbing psychological characteristic of too many Democratic voters. You know, we've been trained to keep our political conversations so shallow that even in the Democratic Party, we sort of farm out our critical thinking. There's this parroting of these pale, stale platitudes. We are going to vote for Joe Biden. He won before, therefore he'll win again, which to me is like saying to an actor, you won the Oscar last year, so surely you'll win it this year, when it's a different movie this year. So I find it disturbing that so many Democrats who consider themselves so concerned about.
Well, that's a result of the aggregate of what incumbent advantage is. Like when you're the incumbent candidate, you have like a name recognition advantage from being, you know, the president, as opposed to everybody else who's not the president. I mean, in politics, just having people know who you are makes you inherently more electable than people who haven't had their name out there. And most people don't know who Marianne Williamson is. And that is a huge roadblock to her success as a candidate.
Democracy are treating Dean and Cenk and myself like we're doing something wrong. You know, I'm old enough to remember when Eugene McCarthy primaried Lyndon Johnson, and when Bobby Kennedy Sr. Primaried Lyndon Johnson. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives some special assignation to incumbency. And when those men ran against Lyndon Johnson, and it was very important that they did because that helped end the Vietnam War, nobody thought it was weird. We just thought it was democracy. So Democratic voters and the fact that they're willing to go along with this craziness from the DNC, I hope more of them will wake up and remember that there's nothing in the Constitution or even in our traditions, contrary to what they would have you believe, that would indicate that it's the DNC that should be making this decision. Rather, it is the people and the people alone who should be making this decision. And if they did, and they really heard Cenk and really heard Dean and heard me.
I mean, that's true outside of a primary. The primary takes place within the Democratic Party. So, like, the Democratic Party does have a lot of control over how the primary primary elections happen. And if you want the people to decide just generally without the oversight of the DNC, then you can run as an independent. Just, I mean, like, there are criticisms that you can make of the DNC, you know, that it's bought by corporate money, that it's this and that and the other. Like, there are valid criticisms to make here, but, like, it's frustrating to see, like, this kind of wibbly-wobbliness about the actual process.
In the debates, I think that Joe Biden would have some serious contenders, and I think that's what he's really afraid of.
I heard you, Marianne. I agree with a lot of what you said, including on the Oscars. I would love for Brendan Fraser and Michelle Yeoh to win again, but I don't think that it's going to happen, unfortunately. But I'll be tuning in. In any event, there was references to going a little bit deeper. So I want to get into the first real back and forth that we saw at that debate, which was Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley, and I believe Vivek Ramaswamy got involved in this too, talking about corporate influence on candidates and on policy. And so, Cenk, I want to start with you first. We've been talking a lot about the Democratic status quo, the Democratic establishment, which is not just about an approach to primaries. It's also about the approach to corporations, campaign finance, corporate PACs. What do you think about this? How is it influencing your candidacy, and would it influence your presidency?
Yeah, so I believe none of us are taking corporate PAC money, and that is a giant part of the corruption in this system. So I think probably Representative Phillips can talk to how much call time you have to do to just get reelected into Congress and get elected the first time. Everybody's constantly pleading with rich folks, corporations, et cetera, super PACs, dark PACs, dark money PACs for money. This is insane. This is legalized bribery. So, the one thing, and Vivek Ramaswamy is unbearable, but the one thing that he was right about is, yes, it's corruption when you work in government and then you go and work for one of the giant corporations that you were helping when you were in government, as Nikki Haley did with Boeing. And
I personally, if I wanted to get elected, I would just call my voters big dumb idiots, and I think that would work. I'd call them big dumb idiot pay piggies. I think that is that's how you get votes.
You funnel money to them when you're in government, and then you get the rewards, and you get millions of dollars from them when you leave government, and then you go back into government and you funnel them our money, though. You're not funneling them their money. You're funneling our money to them, right? And to the tune of billions, and sometimes with the defense contractors and the pharmaceutical companies, trillions of dollars. So, and I wish the Democratic Party was immune from this, but it isn't. And so the Democratic establishment takes tons of corporate PAC money. I believe Joe Biden has taken about $150 million from dark money PACs. So do we think that you take $150 million and that you're not affected by that at all? That you're like, oh no, somebody gave me all that money, and that's the source of my power. That's how I can say, hey, I'm more electable because I have so much more money. But that doesn't affect you? That you're not going to do something to try to get that money? No, I'm sorry, but I don't believe that. So yes, Mitch McConnell's taken about $1 billion in donations from rich people and corporations throughout his career, and that is obviously corrupt, and any Democrat will tell you that's corrupt. But Nancy Pelosi has also taken $1 billion from donors. And so this is systemic. It isn't that Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi are evil. Although with Mitch McConnell, there is a good case to be made.
Yes.
But it is the system that is
McConnell
wrong.
Is definitely
and so
evil.
That's what we've got to attack. And unfortunately, most of the politicians and most of the media don't address this at all. And I'll add one thing to Marianne's analogy about the Oscars. If you do it about anything else, it makes no sense at all. Biden was 15 points higher the last time Trump and Biden squared off. He was at 52 points, he's now at 37. He's got to make up 15 points. It's not the same as last time, and he barely won by 44,000 votes in 3 swing states last time. It's like saying, and that was about 3 years ago. 3 years ago, Tampa won the Super Bowl. The Buccaneers would stand no chance of winning the Super Bowl today. It's absurd to say, oh yeah, same thing. It's not the same thing. And we could tell from Biden's demeanor as well that it's been a long 3 years.
I'm going to just throw out one more. We asked everybody to keep their answers concise, but also if you could keep your political metaphors to being about movies rather than sports, I would really prefer that. I can't speak to the audience, but Marianne, what do you think about this? The corruption, the corporate influence.
Well, we all know that money in politics is the cancer that underlies all the other cancers. We have to become as intentional about overturning Citizens United as some Americans were intentional about overturning Roe v. Wade for many years. We also, ultimately, we need a constitutional amendment that will establish public funding for federal campaigns. All the revolving door issues that Cenk talked about are absolutely correct. But even if it weren't for that money, just the fact that if you look at the cost of getting on these ballots alone, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars, so even that's in addition to all the shenanigans that they're doing now, the system is rigged so that no one who doesn't either have a lot of money or access to a lot of money it has any chance of getting near the pinnacles of power. So then the American people wonder why our legislators aren't passing laws that actually serve the people. That's because in the vast majority of the cases, they're not from what we think of as the constellation of average Americans who are living through average American things. And also, Dean, I don't mean to be putting you on the spot here. I really don't. This is an honest question. But Cenk said that you weren't. And what is Steve Schmidt doing? And what is the PAC situation with you? I do think it's a reasonable question.
Oh, happy to address that. Let me start with my overarching comment on campaign finance reform, because it is the cancer of all cancers. And Cenk, you asked the question about call time in Congress. 10,000 hours per week collectively is what members of Congress spend raising money. And I'm going to tell you the dirty little secret. Not only does all that money buy access and influence, of course it does, but what it really is so troubling is that when you spend all your time with people who have money, the well-to-do and the well-connected, by definition, you're not spending time with the broad cross-section of Americans that are struggling. I watched that debate tonight. I was astounded that they barely talked about affordability. They barely talked about healthcare. They barely talked about housing. They barely talked about education. And that's because members of Congress and all the political class right now are spending so much of their time with the wealthy and the well-connected that they have completely lost touch with what's going on in this country. Are we surprised that we have Trumpism? We shouldn't be. And I'm the only member of Congress, the only one out of 535 that takes no PAC money of any kind, no lobbyist money. I don't take member money, I don't give it, and I don't have a leadership PAC. I think that's how the whole game should be played. I raise enough money for my congressional races from individual donors to make it work. But that's the system. And by the way, until the rules can change, people are going to have to play by them. As for Steve Schmidt, he helped me start my campaign because you know why? I couldn't find a single Democratic consultant to work on my campaign when I launched because they were all going to be blackballed by the establishment. Steve Schmidt was the only person who is so committed to defeating Donald Trump. He said, I'll help you get there. He volunteered to do it, left my campaign right after I launched. He's doing his own thing, I think, very similar to the Lincoln Project, to simply defeat Donald Trump. And I think that's his mission once again. He said in 2020, Biden was the only one that could do it. In 2024, he thinks I'm the one to do it. And that's, I'm thrilled that he's got that faith in me. I believe I can too, but that's the dirty little secret. It is so appalling and so abhorrent. And that's what people should know. 10,000 hours per week raising money. I can't find someone to go to dinner with in Washington on a Wednesday night because everybody's going to PAC dinners, getting their white envelopes with the $5,000 2-3 times a night. That's the truth.
Wow. Well,
That's part of why it's so, I'm sorry.
No, continue.
Well, that's why it's so crazy when people say you have to be an experienced politician. It's such a Wizard of Oz imagery about what's going on in Washington. Oh, you have to be one of them because they know what they're doing. No, they spend most of their time raising money, just as Dean just said.
Yeah. Well, perhaps it is a good qualification since when you get into office, that's mostly the only thing they want you to do at that point. But I think, you know, we've got a little bit of time before our first break. I want to jump into the first bit of foreign policy that came up during this debate. So we're going to play a little bit of Ron DeSantis answering a question about what's going on with Hamas, Israel, and the situation in Gaza.
We have to look out for our people. When there are hostages, Commander-in-Chief, you have to do whatever you can to get them done. But the overall issue with this is this administration is trying to hobble Israel from being able to defend itself. They have a right to eliminate Hamas and win a total and complete victory so that they never have to deal with this again. Hamas wants nothing less than a second Holocaust. They would wipe off every single Jew off the map. They would destroy the state of Israel if we could. Joe Biden will say they support Israel, and then they do nothing but try to kneecap them every step of the way. You should not try to direct their war effort. We should work together with them so that they can bring Hamas to heel.
So there, Ron DeSantis was pretty clear that he doesn't think there should be effectively any limitations on what Israel does in pursuit of Hamas in Gaza. Now, the context too, though, was he was asked a specific question about whether he would allow for US forces to be used in Gaza. And he didn't want to answer that. And that was actually pointed out by Chris Christie. So why don't we play a little bit of that?
Yeah, Chris
This
Christie
is the
was
problem
coming in
with
with
the first three
chair.
debates. Ron gets asked a question and he doesn't answer it. Your question was very specific. You said, would you send American troops as commander-in-chief? And he went on to this minute and 30-second hosanna about his knowledge of the military and what we need to do and didn't answer your question. Look, when you're president of the United States, you're not going to have a choice whether to answer that question or not. Your generals, your Secretary of Defense, your Secretary of State, your National Security Advisor are going to present plans to you. They're going to look at you and say, do we go or don't we, Mr. President? And you can't give a 90-second speech about your military service, as wonderful as it is.
Would you send American troops in to rescue those hostages?
Absolutely. If they had a plan which showed me that we could get them out safely, you're damn right I'd send the American Army in there to get our people home and get them home now. And I'll answer that question directly.
So he was very direct. He would send US forces in if it was requested, if there was a plan. Ron DeSantis went on to still not answer the question. And look, we're very used to politicians on debate stages not answering direct questions, but this seems pretty consequential what you think the US's involvement in this continued conflict should be. So I want to turn to our participants now, starting with you, Marianne. What should US involvement be in this conflict? What should the government be doing right now? What would you do, assuming the conflict is still raging, were you to become president?
I don't have a problem with the United States supporting Israel. The issue is this bombing of Gaza, I don't even think is supporting Israel. I think the United States should have an equal commitment to the safety and the security and the human rights of both people. We all understand why Israel is furious. And we also might understand, Ron DeSantis has such an incredibly simplistic view of what's going on there. He says we need to help Israel win, have a victory so this could never happen again. What does he call a victory? Even if they are to get rid of all of the tunnels, which I certainly understand the urge to get rid of the tunnels, but their effort to do so is creating so much more hate. It is creating so much more Hamas. Hamas is not just an limited group of people, it's also a philosophy. So the United States should have for decades now been being far more truthful. I'm sorry, the settlements are illegal. The West Bank occupation is illegal. The siege of Gaza was wrong. No justice, no peace. There was never a military solution to the situation. The only solution is peace and justice for both people. I can see this only as a two-state solution at this point. And similarly, right now, there is no military solution. And the more time goes on, the more we still aren't hearing from Israel, what's the game plan here? So that the worst accusations against it are becoming harder and harder to deflect or to disagree with. So the United States should be saying complete ceasefire, release of the hostages, and immediately an international consortium to work on plans for a two-state solution. And this has to involve, of course, Bahrain, UAE, Qatar, Jordan, Egypt, as well as Western powers, as well as the United States. We're living in a multipolar world now. There's no one country that goes in and can say what it's going to be anymore. But that's what the United States should stand for. Ceasefire, release of the hostages, two-state solution. And now the killing has got to stop.
Representative Phillips, what would your approach be? What should Biden be doing right now?
Well, I'm the ranking member of the Middle East Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs. I've been to Jerusalem twice this year. I sat down with the Prime Minister, looked him in the eye, told him exactly what I thought. Had no idea, of course, that October 7th was forthcoming. Been to Riyadh and to Istanbul and Ankara. To have conversations with both the Turks and the Saudis. We were so close to getting the Saudis to normalize with Israel. One reason I think the attack occurred on October 7th, by the way, is Iran. They don't want peace. Hamas doesn't want peace. And I hope Israelis soon choose to pursue a path of peace. At the end of the day, it's not a simple solution, but it's a simple plan. Release the hostages. By the way, there are 8 Americans sitting in the tunnels right now, held hostages for now 2 months, by a terrorist organization. And any of us who might become president should make that our #1 priority. I do believe we made a big mistake with the $6 billion that was not the release of it, but the access to it in exchange for 5 prisoners from Iran. I think that sends a message to anybody else, including Hamas. If you take American prisoners, you can extract billions of dollars. I think the president should be speaking about this every damn morning, should use every tool available to him, diplomatic tools, pressure with our foreign aid, and yes, special forces if they have a plan to extract Americans. It's the longest Americans have been held hostage in this number since the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Release the hostages, an immediate ceasefire, replace Israeli troops in Gaza with an international, multinational peacekeeping force to keep the peace for Palestinians and Israelis, not to include Israel and the United States, but Hamas has got to be eliminated. That would also take a multinational task force. And then we have to all collectively make investments in civil society, democracy, infrastructure. And then 2 things have to happen. Palestinians must be afforded the chance to vote for the first time since 2006. The Palestinian Authority is corrupt. Mahmoud Abbas in his 80s, corrupt. Pay to slay is happening right now. They pay people who would be so bold as to kill an Israeli. And Hamas is clearly dedicated to the destruction of Israel and the destruction of Jewish people. It's plain and simple. They've got to go too. And if Israelis and Palestinians finally choose peace,
something tells me that this guy is not going to do too well as an alternative to Biden. Just throwing it out there. I do have to say, I think the idea that, like, oh well, these two mortal enemies won't negotiate because they're both dedicated to killing the other. I mean, yeah, but your job is to get them to negotiate a peace. That's the difficulty of negotiating peace. You get them to not do that. That's the entire point of getting them to agree to a ceasefire, so you can get them to talk about how they won't do that.
Peace. Every single nation in the world, friends and foes, Chinese and the U.S.
Like, if your position is just, oh, we need to kill all those people. Well, your position is actually the one that is antithetical to coming up with a peace agreement.
Russians and everybody else, Gulf states, have got to unify behind this.
One of the major.
I'm just going to turn the light back on President Biden. He's been in Washington for 50 years. He was the chairman and ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, 8 years as vice president, 3 years as president. It's the same cycle of nonsense my entire life. And to think the same people in the same positions doing it the same way are going to achieve success, Netanyahu's got to go. The settlement policy, I agree, is wrong. And Israelis, thank goodness, live in a democracy. 2 million Muslims living side by side with safety and security and protection. A multinational country protecting LGBTQ plus rights, women's rights. You know, there are 140 Israelis that live in Gaza, but they're right now held hostage in a tunnel. So this has to end. And I just think it's time for the pro-Palestinian and the pro-Israeli factions around the world to join hands, not take arms, join hands, because humanity is more important than nationality or religion, plain and simple.
Cenk, I want to end this segment by giving you a chance to respond to this topic.
Yeah. So there are actually some things that I disagree with Dean on, but I do want to agree with him that yes, Biden has been in Washington for 50, maybe even 60 years at this point. And when they do that thing about, oh, he's Joe from Scranton. Oh, come on, guys, come on. He hasn't been to Scranton in 5, 6 decades in terms of living there. Okay, but let's address the issue here. So look, I agree with Chris Christie that Ron DeSantis never answers a question, and I think that was one of his better moments. But I wildly disagree with Chris Christie when he says we should send in American troops. Okay, first of all, that's nuts. We're not gonna go and get into a bigger war in the Middle East. Number two, what are they needed for? It's not like the Palestinians have an ability to fight back against Israel's military. Israel's military is 2,000 times stronger. It's not really a war, it's just utter destruction of Gaza. So what happened on October 7th was horrific, and Israel had the moral high ground there, and I wish that they had gone to a productive solution, which I'm gonna offer here at the end. But look, all the Republicans there, I think, for lack of a better word, are mental. I mean, Ron DeSantis talking about how Joe Biden has kneecapped and hobbled Israel's response. How many more civilians did you want him to kill? So there's 15,000 dead in Gaza, and Joe Biden pretty much gave a complete green light to that. Certainly for the great majority of the time. Is 15,000 dead civilians not enough for Ron DeSantis? And so how much more of a green light could Joe Biden have given Israel? It's preposterous. So look, the idea that you're going to get a total and complete military victory that DeSantis talked about against Hamas is absurd. When is Hamas going to get up and go, okay, we lost? How? How would we even know? How would we know if the Palestinians have turned on Hamas? How would we know if Hamas is lost? We haven't seen Hamas basically since October. So yes, they fire rockets, etc. But they're in the tunnels, and the tunnels appear to be completely unaffected by the bombing, yet Israel continues to drop 2,000-pound bombs. And now Israel has admitted, yes, there are 15,000 dead in Gaza. And so look, my solution is harsher in regards to restricting our ally. If you're going to use our money to kill those civilians, I say no. I would not send $14 billion to Israel for more death and destruction. And I honestly would not send them any more money, period, until they end the occupation. It has to be 2 states. It's non-negotiable. I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to kill Palestinian civilians and to keep them occupied in an open air prison for decades. So no deal.
I think that's
now,
fair.
if they end the occupation, then fantastic. We love Israel and we want Israel to be a flourishing, beautiful country that is a strong democratic ally of America. So finally, the productive solution is, look, if Israel were to now say, you know what, we're going to do a deal with the Palestinian Authority and they are going to run Gaza. But in order for them to have the moral authority to do that, because at this point, even Palestinians in the West Bank are beginning to see the Palestinian Authority as collaborators with Israel because they're helping to continue to occupy the West Bank, say we are reaching a peace deal, 1967 borders, and we're doing it not with Hamas, never with Hamas, but with the Palestinian Authority. So Palestinian Authority then can come and take Gaza and control Gaza and
Part of the issue, and this isn't just related to Cenk, but part of the issue that you would run into here is that Palestinians in the Gaza Strip do not trust or believe in the Palestinian Authority. They view them as hopelessly corrupt. Like hopelessly corrupt, you know? Like a pretty solid majority. I think it was like 80%. Yeah, it's not great. It's not great.
drive Hamas out. That actually would be total and complete victory against Hamas, because then the Palestinian Authority would say, we brought you a Palestinian state. And they would have the credibility to be able to do that. And if you want to say, hey, maybe not 1967 borders, take 4% for settlers, etc. Okay, we can have that conversation. But get to a peace deal immediately, get to a 2-state solution immediately, and regain the moral high ground for Israel and for America.
We are going to have to take our first break.
Guys, if I could just say one thing quick.
Fast response.
I'm not here to defend Chris Christie, but just facts are facts. The question was whether you would use troops to extract the hostages. That was my comment. That was Christie's comment. I don't think any was proposing sending American boots to the ground, but I do think it's an American president's priority and prerogative. If American hostages are being held and there is a plan to extract them, to then use American troops, not in a ground war in Israel or Gaza, but to extract Americans. That should be our highest priority. By the way, why is it not on every single newspaper cover every day? Why is the president not speaking about it every single day? And I got to tell you all, the truth is, I think it's because they're Israeli Americans. And that's the truth.
But nobody knows where they are. And everybody knows that they don't know where they are. The Israelis don't know
Marian,
where they are.
But my point wasn't that. My point is, we have 8 American hostages being held in Gaza by Hamas. And I think this should be a bigger deal to the United States of America. That's all I'm saying. They're Americans.
Okay. Yeah, I got to agree with Dean on that. I think that Israel should have used special forces from the first day to try to rescue the hostages from inside the tunnels. Dropping bombs on civilians and residential buildings, hospitals, etc., doesn't help rescue the hostages at all. We got to get our
certainly
people
agree
back.
with that.
We got to get our people back, and we've got to show the courage to be able to go into those tunnels and extract them.
Okay, on that note, we
need
do have to take our first break, everyone. We're going to mix it up more on the other side of this. I just want to remind everyone watching live that you do have an opportunity at a discount on annual membership to TYT. You can get that at tyt.com/annual to access that. That's an exclusive offer that we're providing to those watching live. And with that, we're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. TYT Democratic Presidential Candidate GOP Debate Response Forum. Figure out the acronym on that. We've got a lot more to dive into, and I actually want to start off with
Hey, Beard Tweezer. My dude, thank you very much for the raid. Welcome, Raiders. We are going through the TYT Democratic Primary Forum debate. Did Cenk just switch to send our special forces to get the Americans from the tunnels now? Yeah. Cenk is also... I mean, I think Cenk said is is intending to mean the Israeli special forces would go into the tunnels to rescue the Americans, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I don't think the Israeli IDF is going to prioritize Americans over Israelis. Hey, VCC TV, welcome back. Absolutely not. Simply because they are American citizens taken hostage in a foreign country, we don't just invade as a de facto stance, as an extreme last-ditch measure. It's literally an act of war. I don't necessarily have a problem with like a raid, but like putting boots on the ground. Like a raid is an incredibly risky maneuver because if it goes wrong, you have your troops captured. You have like your material captured, your intelligence is compromised. It puts you in a far worse bargaining position, both in the like direct back and forth and in the eyes of the world. Yeah, like it's not it shouldn't be a go-to. It is literally like a Hail Mary type move.
Representative Dean Phillips here. You had mentioned in one of your earlier responses that there wasn't much of a conversation about affordability, and it did come up very briefly in a question that Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis responded to, talking about how it seems increasingly impossible for especially young Americans to conceive of owning their own home. And what they were promised by those candidates, Nikki Haley promised to veto government spending bills and grow the economy, and Ron DeSantis said the same and added that he would drill for more oil. So I feel reassured. Is there anything else, hard as it is to imagine, that could be done to make home ownership more conceivable?
Absolutely. I have to tell you all, I'm sure you feel the same way.
Tell us more.
Considering these are the top 4 alternatives to the most dangerous man in the history of the United States. And I'm just astounded by their lack of ideation, innovation. It's all nonsense. And the truth of the matter, this is so simple. We live in a very simple economy, supply and demand. We are 6.5 million housing units short, which means prices will always be high no matter interest rates. No matter who becomes president, we need to initiate a 7 million unit, massive nationwide housing construction initiative. Multifamily, high density units all around the country. We know how to do it. We have to change some zoning laws. We have to reduce some of the red tape. We have to ensure there's capital provision. But until we build more housing units, prices won't go down and availability won't go up. We have 500,000 Americans sleeping in the streets. Not just San Francisco and LA and Chicago and New York. I'm here in New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire, across the street. There are veterans sleeping in Veterans Park, for goodness sake. So this is not rocket science. And when you work and live in a market economy, it's really simple. If you create the circumstances by which private developers, in this case, want to build because they can make a profit, it's so simple. And I cannot believe that not one of the GOP candidates on that stage tonight said the most simple thing. We should have a national housing initiative, period, end homelessness, ensure that everybody has a home. And yes, interest rates are way too high, and we should make sure that first-time home buyers and first-generation home buyers have a chance. I'd also like to see a national service program where after high school, if you take a year and join AmeriCorps or Peace Corps, we will seed you with some capital to buy a home, because that's how we create wealth in America. I think those are some ideas we should consider, and I'd love to hear from my friends.
Hey, Paladin. We weren't trying to hide stream from you. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha. Hey, Melanie Dennis. But like, don't we already homes, apartments, condos already built but empty because of exploitive and greedy landlords / property managers? Yes, we do. And we actually did a 2-hour stream the other day where I talked about vacancy taxes and how those can help alleviate some of the problem there. But another element here is building more homes where we need them. Because part of the issue of homelessness is not just like, oh, well, you can just take some of the housing that's not being used, because again, some of the housing that's not being used is out in the middle of nowhere, right? Like, it's kind of like saying, oh, just move to the middle of Kentucky, you know, in the middle of nowhere. Just move. So you need to be able to build housing, especially in areas where there is like a low vacancy rate. You need to be able to have policies that would enable you to build more in those areas. Like, it's not like building more. I know a lot of people just like roll their eyes, but like building more does help. It's not the silver bullet, you know? I can only speak for San Francisco, but holy shit, it would help here. Oh yeah, Ms. Milena, absolutely. We went down the rabbit hole of like vacancy taxes, and basically all I could find was that in the most comprehensive research on it, like even if you don't look into any other aspects or look into like improving the policy at all, it can like reduce vacancy rates by 13%, and in a lot of cases it reduces them by even more. And like that's a pretty good chunk, you know? It, again, not a silver bullet, not going to be enough on its own, but like reducing that, having a mechanism, it can also serve as a mechanism to kind of reverse gentrification of areas. It's just generally a good policy. Thoughts on the housing issue is why we are always trying to shove it down the throats of wealthy suburbs. Plenty of serviceable land in the Midwest. Frankly, these people are lawyers, doctors, or other professionals that need to be in the city center. Well, the issue is that like you can't just be like, homeless people in New York City. Have you considered moving to Iowa? You know, like they're not gonna want to move to Iowa the same way. Like if you just walked up to a random person and was like, move to Iowa. Generally speaking, they're not gonna be like, fuck yeah, I have always wanted to move to Iowa. They're going to be like, no, I want to be here. Honestly, like, I think we just need to bring back mixed developments. I talked a little bit about this on the vacancy tax stream, but I think one of the upsides of vacancy taxes is that if you applied them to both homes and retail space, you might be able to basically, toll the bell for malls as retail spaces, because there are a lot of dead and dying malls in America, and the people who own them just kind of like sit on them, hoping that someone's going to come along and like Apple's going to rent out a space in their store again, even though that's never going to happen. And I think vacancy taxes could basically lead to those buildings being sold to local, state, city governments, and from there, like the state and the city can redevelop them into like community housing projects that integrate like both business and living space. And I think that would be a really, really good idea, along with like social services and such. You basically have built-in, like in the architecture of a mall, like built-in common space, and I think that's a really wonderful thing that we should have more of. Anyway, free housing in Iowa, you just need to get on the bus. Holy hell, that bus would be filled. I think you would be surprised by the history of putting homeless people on the buses to the middle of nowhere and how effective that was. It wasn't effective.
Cenk, let's go to you next. What do you think can be done?
Yeah, so first of all, with the Republicans, it is stunning how little they talk about the average American. Almost not at all. They talk about who they're going to invade. They're going to go after China. They're going to send special forces into Mexico. Different weirdo wars they're going to start, and corporations that they're going to.
I mean, they don't just want to send special forces into Mexico. They want to bomb Mexico.
Kiss up to, etc., and never talk about the average American. So first off, if I was Joe Biden, let alone any of the other presidents, I would have done $15 minimum wage instantly, immediately. That was their first promise, the bare minimum promise, and they didn't do it. Why? Guys, when you increase the minimum wage, it increases the wages for everyone. That's when everybody flips out in the establishment and goes, oh my God, inflation. No, you need higher wages to keep up with the inflation that already happened. So we've got to stick up for the average guy instead of all the multinational corporations. Lower drug prices. Why can't we negotiate drug prices? That's not capitalism. That's the exact opposite of capitalism. They've totally captured our government. And every politician, Democrat or
What? Negotiating drug prices is capitalism. What? Okay, my brain is not firing on 100 obviously right now.
a Republican that becomes president says, oh, it's too hard to do in Washington. But they never explain why. Why is it too hard to do the bare minimum in a capitalist free market system of negotiating drug prices?
That's true, Sweetmix Music. I think a lot of people do forget that, like, if you live in the middle of nowhere, your options for like getting a job and having an income are basically work at the local gas station or the local diner. And if you don't, or like maybe there's a company town that like functions nearby and you can get work at the factory or something. Like those are your options really. Otherwise you have to drive for like 3 or 4 hours to like a slightly larger town where you can work as like a receptionist. Yeah, it's not good.
It's because the drug companies have bought all the politicians. They gave them literally billions of dollars in legalized bribes. That is why if Barack Obama or Donald Trump go to try to negotiate drug prices, which they didn't, but if they did, they would be met with a wall of Republicans and Democrats who would say, no way, I take money from drug companies, I serve drug companies. We will keep those drug prices sky high. And then Joe Biden brags that he did negotiated drug prices on one drug out of tens of thousands. Congrats. Wow, at least you got up to do that. So now, when it comes to the housing prices, again, Biden back in 2020 said, oh, these young kids, they think they have it tough. That's malarkey. We had it much tougher. No, you didn't. That's not even remotely true according to the facts. Student debt is now much higher than it was in Biden's time. Housing prices are infinitely higher than the 1800s when Biden was first thinking of buying. I don't know what Biden's first house was. Was it worth $5, $25? It's a literal question. I know that it's not literally $25, but he probably bought a house for around $20,000, $25,000. That doesn't happen anymore. In the big cities, nobody can afford houses. Now coming straight out of Compton means you're a millionaire because that's what the houses in Compton are going for in LA. Okay, so how do you get a hold of it? You do real things that can help. First of all, private equity is swallowing up all the residential real estate in this country. Do you understand what happens if they do that? Number one, the number one way that American families build wealth is through their houses.
It's true.
If the private equity guys, Wall Street, buys up all the houses, then we can no longer build any wealth. And then they've got us, we're indentured servants forever. Because we have no wealth to fight back with, we have no house of our own, and then we have to pay them rent. So they just extract and extract and extract. So in cities like LA, New York, et cetera, they constantly talk about building more houses, fighting homelessness, as Dean referred to. And then they take a giant amount of money from us and they never fix the problem. Why? They actually do dedicate a lot of money to real estate, but real estate is usually the #1 donors in state politics. So what they do is they take the money and build luxury high rises because those pay more. I get it. They get a good.
And then they can sit on them until they find, 20% occupancy, which pays for all of the bills for the luxury apartment. They don't need to fill it up all the way in order to make money. And they're sitting high and dry with a mostly empty apartment building.
Break a profit, but don't do it with our money. If we're financing building houses, it should be affordable housing and it should be for the average American. So we're getting robbed left and right from both the companies and the politicians.
You mentioned there Wall Street. Actually, just earlier today, Jeff Merkley and Adam Smith introduced a bill that would ban Wall Street like gobbling up of real estate. Marianne, I want to go to you next. Is Should we be focusing mainly on big corporations' effect on the supply and hoarding housing, or is there something else that you think could have a bigger impact on housing affordability?
Yeah, there's something else. Obviously, private equity is a big part of this, but still, that's just talking about the symptom, and we need to talk about the root cause. The root cause of all of this is the fact that the American economy is so rigged. You know, in the 1970s, the average American worker had decent benefits, could afford a house, could afford a car, could afford a vacation, could afford for one parent to stay home with the kids if they wanted, the couple could, and they could afford to send their kids to college. Over the last few decades, there has been a $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. So the housing crisis is like everything else. It is a malevolent strain of vulture capitalism that has its tentacles into every sector of American society. We need to cut the cord with that aberrational neoliberal trickle-down chapter of American history and begin again. We need an economic bill of rights. Remember, one of the reasons people can't afford a house is they can't afford anything. You know, there's a saying that Americans can't afford America. So why can't they afford a house? It's not just the prices of houses. It's everything else they have to pay for. That's why in an economic bill of rights, we have universal health care. It's not just negotiating with the pharmaceuticals. We should go on and have Medicare for all, universal health care. We should get rid of these college loan debts. We should have tuition-free college and tech school. We should have subsidized child care. We should have guaranteed sick pay. We should have guaranteed housing, which might include a domestic Marshall Plan and a guaranteed living wage. This is not just about a higher minimum wage. We need a living wage. As long as we have an economy in which we are not addressing the fundamental fact that we are a government of the corporations, by the corporations, for the corporations, not just in housing, but in everything, and return to the fundamental commitment to a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, then even if you make it right on the symptom of housing, you're still going to have too much, in fact, what is now ubiquitous human suffering in this country. Public policy should help people thrive. And in too many cases, in fact, in issue after issue after issue, our elected representatives pass laws that make it easier for those who already have capital to have access to more, and make it harder for everyone else who is even struggling to get by. So it's really important that we see that about housing and about everything else. These are symptoms, and we need to address the underlying problem, and that's what the Democratic Party should stand for. That should be our counter narrative to the Republicans in 2024, that they are a group of people at this point and a set of policies that stand only for the very, very rich and for the corporate entities that they represent. The Democratic Party is sort of split right now, and the left needs a spine. And we need to truly stand up for a complete fundamental economic reform, a fundamental economic U-turn, and a new beginning, economically and in every other way, concerning justice, criminal justice, racial justice, economic justice in this country.
All of you in different areas, talked about how this is sort of an interconnected issue with a number of other concerns. And I want to stay on affordability, but I want to talk about the affordability of a few other things that came up during this debate. Actually, Ron DeSantis was asked about the affordability of education, and he was also asked about health insurance in response to basically it was framed around Donald Trump once again saying that he wants to repeal and replace the ACA. Ron DeSantis says that he would supersede it, I think because repeal and replace.
I mean, good luck taking down the rich worldwide. I wish you the best.
Doesn't poll well. Seems like the same thing. But he said we shouldn't be canceling student debt because no one should be, a truck driver should not be paying for some college graduate's gender studies degree. So to avoid that, you could be burdened for your entire life with student debt. And he didn't have any answers other than more competition for health insurance. So, Cenk, I want to go to you next. These are big areas where people are worried about affordability that drains money for people, young people, especially throughout their life. What can be done in these areas?
So, on healthcare, number one, lowering drug prices is so incredibly simple. It's literally what every other country does. It's what every free market does. Hey, a company says, I would like you to pay this. Well, that's not how it works. We're gonna have the market set the prices based on competition. But in this country, because we legalized bribery, they just come in and go, no, this is the price you'll pay. And we'll charge as much as we like. And every Democratic president and every Republican president says, yes, sir, absolutely, sir. Where's the money? Where do I clear my check? Let's be honest. Let's be honest about what's happening. So any one of us could lower drug prices instantly because we're not taking money from drug companies. Problem solved. So that's point one. All right, point two is, look, we need to have universal health care in this country. Medicare for all is a perfectly great way to do it. Every other developed nation has universal health care, the equivalent of Medicare for all. And none of them have sunk into the water, right? I mean, the guys like Louis Gohmert, who's a Republican congressman, made insane claims about Obamacare and said that 20% of the women in this country would die if we had Obamacare. Bunch of lunatics. Did 20% of the women in the country die? No, they got better health care. So now Obamacare was a very mild approach. It's one tiny step towards universal health care. We need to get all the way to universal health care. If Estonia can afford it and every other developed nation on earth can afford it, how can we not be able to afford it? No, of course we can afford it. The only reason we don't have it has nothing to do with healthcare. It has to do with the legalized bribes that almost all of these politicians take from those same drug companies and the health insurance companies. But now let me tell you about the bare minimum. Public option polls at around 70%. 7 out of 10 Americans, including Republicans and definitely independents, they all say, well, at a minimum, I'd like an option of buying from the government my health insurance, just my health insurance, right? Because maybe it's a lower price. I like that idea. Again, something that almost every other developed nation does. Joe Biden said, I'm in favor of public option. You know when he proposed it? Oh, right, never. So you tell me why he didn't propose it. Was he lying? I think he was. Maybe you have a more benign view of Joe Biden. You think, no, Cenk, don't be harsh and don't be unfair. Maybe he's just incompetent and doesn't know how to introduce a bill.
Real good.
Doesn't know how to get an ally to introduce it. Doesn't know how to do a standalone bill and embarrass the Republicans by having them vote against their own voters. He couldn't get, not only couldn't he not get something intensely popular done, he didn't even try. Wouldn't it be amazing to have a Democratic president that you didn't have to beg to do Democratic agenda? Every time a Democratic president wins, now all of us have to get together and push them to do the right thing. Why? We already elected them. We did our part. Why do we have to constantly push them to do the thing that they promised? You won't have to push me. No, I'll be the one doing the pushing. And so yes, if you elect me, I'm gonna fight like hell for the average American, and I don't give a damn what the insurance companies say or the drug companies say or what other corrupt politicians say. We're actually gonna get affordable health care in this country. It is very doable the minute you fight corruption.
Marianne, I wanna go to you next. What do you think?
Yeah, let's be very clear. The majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want universal health care. Not only that, people are waking up to the fact that it is afforded to the citizens of every other advanced democracy, and even some advanced democracies that are not democracies. So when people ask, how are we paying for it? Right now, we're paying for not having it with our lives. 68,000 Americans a year die of lack of health care. 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt. That's a large part when you're talking about housing crisis or anything else, medical debt. So at this point, when you have 18 million Americans who can't even afford to pay for the prescriptions that their doctors give them, when you have 85 million Americans uninsured or underinsured, we have to realize that the insurance companies, yes, it's not only the private equity, which is why people can't have houses, it's insurance companies, which is why people don't have health care, pharmaceutical companies, which is why Americans, over 1 million Americans are rationing their insulin. It's big food companies, which is why we have carcinogens in our food that are forbidden in other advanced democracies. It's chemical companies, which is why we have chemicals and pesticides that we know harm a child's brain. It's big agriculture and what it has done to our farming sectors. It's big oil, which is why I don't care if they have a Democrat or Republican, including Joe Biden. They're ramping up fossil fuel extraction and not ramping it down, even though we know what a threat that is to the future habitability of this planet. And of course, it goes without saying that Democrats and Republicans fall in line with the military-industrial complex. We have to get to this root cause. And that is this matrix of corporate overlords and their short-term profit maximization. The way Washington works right now, the short-term profits of these huge corporate entities, which are their donors, take precedence over the safety and the health and the well-being of the American people. People don't have health care. People can't afford to send their kids to college. They're saddled by college loan debts. They can't get, they can't buy a house. because the system itself is such right now that these corporatist principles of corporate profits take precedence over democratic values. They take precedence over humanitarian values. That's what people have to realize. And that there's only one way to override this. There's only one way to cut the cord with that system of economic tyranny. And that is with a revolution at the ballot box. And Cenk was right at the beginning. We have to go about the business of letting the American people know that's why you should vote for one of us. You should vote for the Democrats. But I've got to tell you something. I don't think Joe Biden can make the argument that I just made, because it's these incremental approaches all staying within the context of, in the final analysis, we're not going to do anything that upsets that much our corporate donors. This is how fundamental the problem is and why the American people need to rise up. Only an intervention on the part of the people can change this now.
Representative Phillips?
I think we're all in agreement. We need national health insurance. Strangely enough, I think Richard Nixon may have been one of the more liberal presidents in my lifetime who started the EPA and proposed universal health coverage. And who undermined it in the Senate? Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy, go figure. Anyway, we're all in agreement. I represent United Health Group in my district. I chaired the board of the largest health system in Minnesota, LINA. I spent a lot of time on this subject. There's no question we need a national health insurance program quickly. 66% of all bankruptcies in the United States of America are due to medical debt. We spend $12,000 per capita, which is double that of any developed nation in the world. And our outcomes are mid-pack. And as Cenk was saying about pharmaceutical pricing, Marianne, you agreed? Yeah, they spend $300 million a year enriching the campaign coffers of my colleagues in Congress. Of course, they want to maintain the status quo. And it's so easy. There should not be a single pharmaceutical sold in the United States of America for 1 penny higher than is sold in Canada, Mexico, France, Germany, Spain, or Japan. Simple. But the biggest issue I have to tell you guys is the system. We don't have healthcare. We have sick care. And that means we pay for sickness. We pay for procedures. We've got to start investing in health. And my goodness, we live in a society as human beings in which incentives matter. So we should be providing incentives to the healthcare providers to keep people sick, out of the hospital, to keep them from being sick. And it's not rocket science, but to your point, we have massively successful industries, both the pharmaceutical industry and the health insurance industry. And let me tell you, I spent a lot of time with my Republican constituents in Minnesota. They are just as disgusted with health insurers and the pharma business as anybody. There is a way to get this done. If Richard Nixon could have proposed it and a Democrat undermined him, I think we should be working together right now and get it done. And by the way, there is more than enough money in that system where we could actually reduce the comprehensive cost of care and have it consume less than the 18% of our total economy than it does right now. It's an absolute.
Thank you all for continuing to watch. We are going to have to take our second break, but I want you to stick around because on the other side of this, we're going to be talking about what might have been the largest single issue focus in the Republican debate, what weirdly wasn't brought up during the debate, and also talking about Donald Trump's attempt to counter-program the debate. All that and more after this. Welcome back, everyone, to the Democratic Presidential Candidate GOP Debate Response Forum. We've got more discussion for you, but we also have an opportunity. If you'd like to become a TYT annual member, you can head to tyt.com/annual to receive a special 24% discount that is available right now. And with that, I do want to jump back in to our conversation. I'm going to be starting off with you, Representative Phillips. I want to talk about what seemed to me like the topic that came up the most, both right off the bat and then later on. And I'm going to start with a question, a video of Chris Christie being asked about the fact that he alone among the Republicans on the stage does not support banning hormonal therapy for transgender youths. Let's take a look at that video.
As a father of 4, I believe there is no one who loves my children more than me. There's no one who loves my children more than my wife. There's no one who cares more about their success and health in life than we do. Not some government bureaucrat, not some, you look at these jokers down in Congress. It takes them 3 weeks to pick a speaker, and up until 2 days ago, they couldn't promote somebody in the military in the United States Senate who earned their new rank. And we're going to put my children's health and my decisions in their hands for them to make those decisions, for Joe Biden to make those decisions, for me and for my wife. Let me just say this. This is not something I favor. I think it's a very, very dangerous thing to do. But that's my opinion as a parent, Megyn. And I get to make the decisions about my children, not anybody else. And every parent out there who's watching tonight, you start to turn over just a little bit of this authority, the authority they're going to take from you next, you're not going to like. I'll stand up for parents each and every time.
You can see there that Chris Christie was alone on that particular issue, and he tried to couch it as a parents' rights issue. But it did come up very often, the larger issue around the LGBTQ community, with both Ron DeSantis and Haley unprompted mentioning the topic in their first questions they were asked, which were not about that topic, and then both of them in their first response to each other talking about it. Vivek Ramaswamy, amongst a long line of the conspiracy theories that he supports, he was machine gunning through them, talked about how he thinks that being transgender is a mental health disorder. And Nikki Haley called trans athlete participation in sports the women's issue of our time. So clearly this is something that they are very hyper-focused on. I want to give you an opportunity, Representative Phillips, to respond to this topic.
Well, first, one of the first statements I heard from Nikki Haley is accusing Ron DeSantis of his "Don't Say Gay" bill of not going far enough. That's Nikki Haley saying this. You guys, I got to tell you, I just don't get it. I wish I did. I don't understand the lack of compassion, the lack of love, the lack of understanding, the lack of basic human decency, and the fact you have candidates on the GOP right now who are fighting harder and harder to be more mean-spirited than the other. I just don't get it. It's appalling. I'm the father of a daughter who's gay. She's extraordinary. I don't know why in the United States of America we have not moved beyond this. And I'm glad as Democrats that we lead with love and compassion. I want to salute one Republican, I think Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, as it relates to trans rights, as to trans young kids playing in sports and whatnot. I think he's doing it better than most, and I think we should pay attention to those who are actually leading with some principle. But what a sad state of affairs tonight. I can't imagine being a trans person, a gay person, a queer person watching that GOP debate tonight. I cannot imagine what that must feel like in the 21st century in the United States of America to see the Republican Party fight to the bottom of such basic human decency issues. And I got to tell you another thing, when it comes to rights, by the way, I'm going to point out the truth when I see it. Remember when President Obama and Vice President Biden had the White House and the House and the Senate for 4 months and they were elected, and we didn't codify women's reproductive rights into law? These are the mistakes that Democrats have been making for far too damn long, far too long. And look at the consequences. This is a party, by the way, the GOP, that says they're for freedom and liberty. And my goodness, every chance they get, they want to take it away from people. And why they think government should be involved in a woman's body, why they think a man, for goodness sake, should even have anything to do with it. Wow. That's why I know we'll all agree on this Zoom tonight. Why we are not absolutely destroying Donald Trump in a national election is just astounding. Astounding after the display I saw on that stage tonight. Anyway, that's why I'm proud to be a Democrat, but boy, do we have to take up our game. And most of all, we got to win.
And to bear in mind also that Donald Trump has now announced that he is going to be trying to run as a moderate on the topic of abortion, which you referenced there. We'll see about that. But Cenk, I do want to give you an opportunity to respond to the topic.
Yeah. First of all, Donald Trump's a guy who cost us Roe v. Wade. So the idea that he'd be a moderate on abortion is absurd. And he's only doing that because he's a slimy con man. After he destroys women's rights to choose, now he's going to pretend that he's a moderate on the issue. But the problem with Democrats a lot of times, like Joe Biden, is that they never fight back. So Joe Biden should be out there pummeling Donald Trump on costing women the right to choose. But I haven't heard one word. I haven't heard one word in that regard. Oh, he starts every speech with my Republican friends. Sorry, but I don't have Republican friends. So it's not to say that we're not going to deliver for Republican voters. We are. When we raise wages, their wages are going to go up. When we lower truck prices, their truck prices are going to go down. But when you talk about Republican politicians, sorry, I'm not with these guys. So we showed you right there, John showed you Chris Christie's good answer, and it was a good answer. And as a parent, no, I don't want the government or Republican politicians deciding what to do with my kids. Hell no, no way, under no circumstance. But the other three had horrific, barbaric answers. And they were all talking about like, oh, I banned people from, trans people from bathrooms. Oh, no, I banned them more, I banned them more. I hate them more. Look,
it really
the party
does
of
feel
hate.
like that, you know?
Let's be honest about it. So do most Americans agree with them? No. In fact, on that bathroom bill, over 2/3 of Americans were on the side of transgender rights. They do, the great overwhelming majority of the country does not agree with the Republican hate mongers. But yet the Democrats don't seem to be able to fight back effectively or sometimes at all. So we've got to change that dynamic. Have you ever seen Joe Biden this animated about this issue? Or even any issue? Or even taking on Republicans? So look at Vivek Ramaswamy or Ramaswamy, just calling being transgender mental health disorder. Brother, you got a mental health disorder. And that disorder is not being able to tell the truth. You are the most fake, plastic, inauthentic person I have ever seen. Oh, Donald Trump was wrong about the election. Oh, I'm running and I want to kiss Donald Trump's ass. Oh, Donald Trump's right about everything. Then why are you running against him? Okay, look, you see me saying harsh things about Joe Biden. You know why? I'm in a race against him. I think he's going to lose to Donald Trump. I'm positive. So we need someone else to run against Donald Trump. Vivek Ramaswamy doesn't look like he's in the race against Donald Trump at all. He looks like he's in the race to help Donald Trump. And by pushing hateful agendas like that, unfortunately he is. So the Don't Say Gay bill, it's monstrous. I met a dad in Florida who's gay and has 2 kids. They couldn't put their picture up on the yearbook because it had a rainbow flag behind them in their house when they took the picture. And she couldn't write, his daughter couldn't write an essay about her dad because she had to talk about the fact that he's gay because it came up in terms of his partner. And the teachers are scared to death that their action is going to be taken against them if they allow that girl to write that essay. This is disgusting. It's hate, and we have to fight back. We can't just sit here and go, oh yeah, you want to pass those bills? And they did, they passed dozens of bills in those states. So we need Democrats who don't mind fighting Republicans. It's not too much to ask for.
Marianne?
We need to do more than fight back. We need to remind Americans what this country is supposed to be about. You know, our Declaration of Independence, Abraham Lincoln said it is an eternal rebuke to forces of tyranny and oppression. To him, it was the whole purpose of the Civil War. The principle is that all men are created equal. All men have inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And governments are instituted to secure those rights. That's the point of transgender Americans. They're American. God creates everybody. Everybody makes their own choices. That's supposed to be what America is about. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness means, in today's language, self-actualization. People should be able to do whatever they want to do, fly as high as they want, soar, spread their wings, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. And that's why transgenders must be protected. One of the first things I would do as president is confer special protection status on transgender Americans, because I am concerned. They are a targeted group. As Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But we're not going to beat the Republicans just by fighting back. And we need to fight back in places. Like I said before, the left needs a spine. But at the same time, we're going to win by reminding America of what's possible. We have been trained to limit our imaginations, our political imaginations. We've been trained to farm out our best, most critical thinking. And that's why we can offer to the American people, and this is how we will win in 2024. Your life could be better. You could have universal health care. You could have a guaranteed living wage. You could have subsidized child care. You could have a Department of Peace. We could end America's drug war. We could have a Department of Children and Youth. We could have a mass mobilization to move from a dirty economy to a clean economy. Things could be better. That's how we are going to win in 2024. You know, Franklin Roosevelt said that we would not have to worry about a fascist takeover in this
Marianne
country
Williamson is
as long as democracy delivered on its
a
promises.
much better candidate than
That's
Cenk.
why we have the fascists so close to the door. They should never
She's
have
still not a
gotten so
good
close to the
candidate,
door.
but she's a better
And when
one.
people say to Cenk and Dean and myself, how could you be doing this? Don't you know the fascists are at the door? We're doing this because the fascists are at the door. And all the Joe
And by the way, I don't mind that any of these people are running in the primary against Biden. Like, the fascists might be at the door, but run as you will in the primary. Like, that doesn't whatever happens in the primary, like, it's fair game. When we get into the general, though, like, that becomes definitely a factor in what we can do going forward, you know?
Biden is saying is let me finish the job. That's no alternative to fascism. The alternative to fascism is an agenda that says your life could be so much better. Let's return to the basic principle. Let's return to government of the people, by the people, and for the people, repudiating overreach by corporate interests that have created this matrix of corporate tyranny. That's what the Democratic Party should stand for. The unequivocal, unabashed advocacy for the working people of the United States. That's what we should be doing, not just fighting them, but creating something new that really does harken back to the original principles, that reminds people what is possible in this country, what is the ideal of this country, not just in the sense of what it gives you in terms of your rights, but in terms of all of our responsibilities to protect and to expand this extraordinary possibility that anyone should be able to thrive. And that means everyone in the world, but it certainly means everyone in the United States, including transgender, including no matter what your color, no matter what your sex, no matter what your sexuality, your gender, your religion. That's the point of the thing. And when people are re-inspired by that, that's when we will have a shot. And that's when we will course correct this nation.
Nicely said. Hear, hear.
Thank you.
We've talked about a number of different topics on this
You're a much better
forum,
candidate
and
than I
a
am.
number of different topics were raised during the Republican debate, but I noticed a few that didn't come up. They're minor issues, but some people are really into them, and apologies if they were briefly mentioned, but little things like mass shootings and gun violence, climate change, other than Vivek Ramaswamy using his literal closing remarks to ensure that we all know that he does not believe that it exists, wages, infrastructure, including train derailments, Ukraine, other than constant discussion about the names of eastern provinces, which Mr. Ramaswamy, they're not provinces, they're oblasts. Islamophobic hate crimes, there was a lot of talk about anti-Semitism, but not about Islamophobia. There was talk about Gaza, but no discussion of civilian deaths in Gaza. No discussion of the opioid epidemic outside of fentanyl contamination. And as a new parent, I thought maybe talking about paid family leave, considering how wildly popular it is, including amongst Republicans who support it at rates above 70%, would have made sense to me. So I want to turn to you, Cenk, first. Any of these topics or anything else that wasn't raised, what do you think was worthy of discussion?
Yeah, so this is exactly why we should have Democratic debates. Because if the average American watched just the Republican debate tonight, they would probably think, oh my God, I guess the country hates gay people and trans people and wants to invade China and Mexico and Gaza. And they would have never heard the Democratic side. So here the points that we have made are so diametrically opposed to the points that the Republicans have made. And by having this forum, we're at least getting that message out, which is exactly what we need to do. We invite Joe Biden to do it with us. So now in terms of those issues, look, paid family leave, you're a little wrong, John. It's not above 70%. Well, it is above 70%, but it's not in that ballpark. It's at 84%, 84%. So Estonia has 82 weeks off for moms who have babies. We have 0 days off, 0 by law. We're the only nation, not only developed nation, almost the only nation on earth that doesn't have any paid family leave. And do you ever see the Republicans talking about that? No, because they serve corporate donors. And so do you know that 74% of Republican voters want paid family leave? Why? Yeah, they want moms to be able to have a baby and then to take 12 weeks off, or dads if the situation is appropriate. But we never discuss any of those issues. Instead, we talk about the maniacal issues that the Republicans bring up because they're the only ones having debates. And they're the only ones that are bringing up issues. We should be bringing up paid family leave. And then I've got to ask Joe Biden, my God, man, if you can't get a bill passed that's at 84% popularity, what can you get passed? What, I mean, why don't you introduce it as a single issue bill in the Senate and embarrass and force the Republicans to vote against 3/4 of their own voters? But we get none of that. Always Democratic apathy and Republican aggression. It's time that we fought back. So I don't have time to go through the whole list that John said. I want to give the others time. But let's take the issue of climate change. Guys, we're running out of time. And these lunatics are talking about we're not giving the oil companies enough. Vivek Ramaswamy on the one hand says, oh, I'm against corruption. On the other hand, he says, no, we should let the oil companies take even more oil out and profit from it. And then when they have the cost of climate change, we should pay it. The taxpayers should pay it. Why don't they pay it? That's an externality of their business. That is a cost of their business. They should pay for it. Every time there's this extreme hurricane or tornado or whatever it might be caused by climate change, we should send the bill to ExxonMobil. And why are we giving $20 billion in subsidies to these companies? And one last thing here that is so important when it comes to climate change and oil prices. They have to stop lying about this in the Republican debates and sometimes in mainstream media. Our drilling, extra drilling, does not affect global gas prices. It is an international market. What we do is a drop in the bucket. And when we drill, it doesn't make us any more energy independent. We, the American citizens, don't get that oil. The corporations get the oil and they can sell it anywhere in the world, and they do. It doesn't stay in America. It's one mythology after another. And finally, guys, I want you to think about this.
Fuzzy.
The last month of the election, what if gas prices go up? Who's going to be blamed? The incumbent in charge is going to be blamed. Who is the one country that actually can affect oil prices worldwide? Saudi Arabia, because they control OPEC. And OPEC is large enough to move global oil prices. Who does Saudi Arabia love in America more than any other politician? Donald J. Trump. What if the Saudis increase gas prices right before the election? We're toast. We're toast. If the candidate is the incumbent president sitting at 37% favorability, and they move gas prices up right before the election, that guarantees Donald Trump a win. We cannot risk that. We cannot have this incumbent run this race. We're allowing ourselves to lose on purpose. I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Marianne, I want to go to you next. Which issue absence stood out the most to you?
Well, I want to say something about what Cenk and Dean were just saying. I think we're all in agreement that we must not have Donald Trump back in the White House. But I don't think the biggest electoral risk for us as Democrats is Donald Trump. People who are going to vote for Donald Trump, they love Donald Trump. You could indict him 91 more times and they'll still vote for him. They vote for him in prison. I don't think that our risk is so much Donald Trump as it is the risk of people staying home, millions of people staying home. And if we don't offer them anything more, then they just might, particularly when it comes to young people and the environment. This President Biden, okayed the Willow Project, the $8 billion ConocoPhillips oil extraction project on the North Slopes of Alaska. And he gave more oil drilling permits even than Trump did. So until we start offering policies, you were talking about paid family leave, and I certainly have that as part of my economic bill of rights. But the issue of paid family leave is not only just for the parents, it's for the child. One of the things I want to do is establish a Department of Children and Youth. If we want the country that we could be in 20 years, we must start paying.
Also, Paladin, bad news. Your advances got rebuffed by another colonist, and now you're wandering sadly like Charlie Brown.
More attention to children 10 years and younger now. We know things about early childhood. That's when it all happens. 90% of a child's brain is developed in the first 5 years. So that's a large part of paid family leave. We have children who are traumatized in this country before preschool. We have elementary school students on suicide watch. In schools all over this country, we have trauma rooms. Why should childhood be such a trauma for millions of children in this country? We have millions of children in this country who go to schools where they don't even have the adequate school supplies to teach a child to read. And if a child cannot learn to read by the age of 10, the chances of high school graduation are drastically reduced, and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. This is how we're going to win in 2024. Allow people to imagine a much better country, not just not them, but what we could create. What we could create for our children, what we could create for our families, what we could create for our communities, what we create for our health. Like Dean was saying, this is not just a matter of treating health. We must create proactively a more healthy society. For that, we must take on the food companies. We must take on the chemical companies. We must take on the environmental issues. 46% of all urban wells in the United States are filled with PFAS. So as long as we have the carcinogens in our food, as long as we have the toxins in our air, as long as we have the forever chemicals in our water, that's what I want to do. I want to picture for the American people that it could all be so much better. We're going to have to repudiate corporate dominance, and we're going to have to start again. And that's what the Democrats should stand for. And if we do, we will win in 2024, because of course, people just want a better life.
Representative Phillips?
Well, there's so much. Childcare, early childhood education, my goodness. The fact that they didn't spend more time or any time talking about the need for a legitimate mental and emotional health care system in the United States that would address so many of the challenge from cradle to grave. The fact that they didn't talk about Social Security, which is literally going to start trimming benefits by 25% within 10 years if we don't address it. By the way, we should raise the cap to $250,000. I'd like to see a pool created so that those who have been successful can return their Social Security benefits to a pool that would be redistributed to the lowest, perhaps 10% of recipients, many of whom literally are having to make sandwiches at night and eat cereal because they just don't have enough money at the end of the month. It's just abhorrent. There's so much that needed to be talked about tonight that wasn't. We talked gun violence, of course, we talked about everything that young people are coming to all of us to talk about: gun violence, climate change. No mention, I don't think, of the AI revolution that is forthcoming, a country that is so woefully ill prepared for both the blessings and the curses. And I'll tell you what I think needs to be talked about more than anything else, because no matter what policies we stand for, what we want to achieve,
Let's go.
if we don't start focusing on national repair, literally repair, we have a dysfunctional Congress. We have a disaster brewing around this country, and no peace around the world. And if we don't bring peace to the world and to our country and don't unify behind that, and frankly, make invitations, not confrontations, but invitations to Donald Trump supporters, as both of you have mentioned tonight, have the same challenges, the same needs, the same anger that many of us have about a system that is absolutely destroying many of the facets of the country that are so dear to us. So we've got a lot of work to do. The fact is, I love what you said, Cenk, about the fact that absent the president of the United States consenting to at least a couple of debates, we are literally giving free airtime to the very party that is going to seize back the White House and completely destroy democracy.
Sorry to hear that, Fenry.
So you know what? I was asked yesterday if I thought President Biden was a risk to democracy. And I said, yes, he is, because he's running in a race in which he's going to lose to the most dangerous man in history. He's not consenting to debates, handing literally every screen in America to millions of people watching every day. He's allowing the Florida Democratic Party and the North Carolina Democratic Party to literally make a decision for probably 10 million Americans that they don't need to vote. We'll make the decision for you, and simply hand his delegates to him and not even allow our voters to go to the polls. And then, of course, in New Hampshire, I mean, it's appalling. He took the first in the nation primary away, told them their votes won't matter, and now is trying desperately to do a write-in campaign and along with a super PAC up here to do it. You know, the dirty truth is we've got a massive disaster in both parties right now. I was part of it. I enabled it. I had no idea until I joined both of you in this endeavor. And I think that's the most important part of this so far, is to speak truth to power, to say the quiet part out loud. And my goodness, watching that GOP debate tonight was horrifying. And to watch the only person in the room who tried to play the role of an adult, that was Chris Christie. He was the guy that was doing debate prep, for God's sakes, with Donald Trump just a couple years ago. So give me a damn break, you know what I mean? Give me a break. And Nikki Haley, who's now the #2 closest, you know, her hand went up right away when they asked him
You don't gotta play defense for Chris Christie.
last time in the debate stage if you'd still vote for Donald Trump, even if he's convicted. Even if he's convicted. My goodness, folks. I'm glad to be on this with all of you because we still have some principle left in politics. And now we need the platform to ensure the country sees it. And right now the president is working against it.
Well, thank you for that. I think I can speak for the network that this has been a great forum. We would be interested perhaps in future follow-up forums or debates. If anybody watching is interested in that, feel free to use your voice. But I want to finish with just one more question, very similar to the way that the debate actually finished. And this will be brief, but it's incredibly serious. Marianne, I want to ask you what they were all asked. Who do you draw inspiration from?
Franklin Roosevelt. Absolutely. He said a necessitous man is not a free man. We have the highest poverty rate of any advanced democracy, including child poverty. He also talked about not only freedoms to, but also freedoms from. Freedom from want and freedom from fear. The Democratic Party should be the conscience of the nation. Too many people are suffering. And Eleanor Roosevelt said to Franklin Roosevelt, we need more than the amelioration of stress. We need fundamental economic reform. Even the president, he wants to ameliorate people's stress, but he'll always stop just before it would actually be challenging that profit motive of those corporate donors upon which he depends. We need fundamental economic reform, an economic bill of rights, unabashed return, course correction, so that like in the 1970s, when we had an actual thriving middle class, the average American has a sense that they too have a shot at the American dream. The American dream for a lot of people right now is to get out of debt before they die. Mm-hmm. We have to change that, and that's what the Democratic Party should stand for. To me, that's what Roosevelt stood for. He believed that government should be used, just as in the Declaration of Independence, to secure the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And also in that declaration, it says that if government's not doing its job, it's the right of the people to alter that. So Roosevelt, Roosevelt, Roosevelt for me.
Representative Phillips, who do you draw inspiration from?
I'll tell you, when it came to resisting Donald Trump, I draw inspiration from my two daughters who woke up the morning after the 2016 election, both in tears. And I promised them at the breakfast table I would do something. And I decided to run for Congress and flipped a district that had been in Republican hands for 60 years since 1958 and beat a man who had won by 14 points the night before. So my daughters inspired me to resist and participate. My father, my birth father, Artie Peffer, was a captain in the U.S. Army, was killed in action in Vietnam in 1969 when I was 6 months old. My inspiration for peace is because of my dad. And I'll tell you that I think the most important is what I just said a moment ago, which is I think national repair, to bring this country back together, to bring peace to the world. Whenever I'm traveling around on the campaign trail, I ask young people, if they had a magic wand, what would you do? And I was at the Laconia Pumpkin Festival here in New Hampshire a couple weeks ago, and a young person I asked that question of, and she didn't want to answer right away. And I asked her again, and she said, if I had a magic wand, I would just ask people in school to be nicer to me. And I thought, of all the people I've spoken with on this whole journey so far, all the people, nothing was more inspirational than that moment. And I think we should all give a little bit of thought to that. As I watched that debate stage tonight and thought about those people, how mean-spirited, the lack of compassion, the lack of decency, talking over each other, so disrespectful. That young person at the Laconia Pumpkin Festival, I'll tell you right now, is inspiring me more than any other American. Let's just be a little bit more decent. Let's be a little more thoughtful. And we Democrats, let's be a little bit more strong. And we got to mobilize, we got to energize. And most of all, let's lead with optimism. It's time for hope. Let's not be destroyed in fear and destroy each other in the pursuit of political power, because we're going to do that if we don't get our act together. And by the way, all those who waited or are waiting until 2028, they're not meeting the moment. They're waiting for themselves. And I'm just proud to be here with all of you, people who have courage to step up. And I hope everybody watching who's paying attention and knows what's at risk, spread that courage around the country right now, not just to Democrats, independents, and also Republicans, the thoughtful, principled ones who recognize what's at stake. So I just want to thank you all. It's been an honor to be with you.
Thank you. And Cenk, will end with you. Where does your inspiration come from?
All right. I want to double down on what both Marianne and Dean said. First, on Marianne, not only did
I'll say what they said, but twice as hard.
FDR do economic bill of rights that changed this country forever and protected our system and looked out for the average man. But he actually fought Republicans, and he liked fighting Republicans. He said they had a lust for greed, and that he wasn't going to allow it. And he said that he welcomed their hatred. Now that's what a strong Democratic president who delivered looks like. Every time Biden starts a speech, he talks about his Republican friends and how much he likes them. That is not the winning strategy. You've got to be able to fight back. Okay, but the person I draw inspiration from and the group is one I talk about on the show all the time. Martin Luther King and other civil rights leaders like Bayard Rustin. They were amazing. So what did they do? They created good trouble. Their job was to create enough trouble to draw attention to the injustices so that we could fight back against the injustices. But what did they do with it? They didn't just fight fire with fire, they fought hatred with love. But they didn't do it in a meek way. They did it in a beautifully aggressive way. That's why it was called good trouble. And not only did it press LBJ to the brink, which caused LBJ to press the Dixiecrats to the brink to get Voting Rights and Civil Rights Act passed, but when the time came, he was practical and took the victory. If we can get that right balance, then the Democratic Party would be in terrific shape. And I want to end on agreeing with Dean. Guys, we need hope in this country. And so often the Democratic answer is there was nothing we could do. I don't accept that. And so in this race, Dean's again right that in a lot of the people that were the Democratic governors, etc., they were worried about how they were going to position themselves for 2028. This is not the time for that. Democracy is actually on the line. And Biden is so far down. He's down 15 points from where he was. And Donald Trump now up 8 points and he needs to lose by 5. So these are terrible, terrible numbers. But we've got to have hope that we can win and that we could fight back and have the side and the forces of justice win out at the end. And how do you get that hope? By all of us working together and saying, yes, there is a way that we can get a much, much stronger Democratic candidate and go take the fight to the Republicans and to Donald Trump. And yes, do it with love and hope in our hearts so that we could win together, for not just for Democratic voters, but for the whole country. I want to thank Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson for participating in this too. And guys, it's an honor to be in the race with you guys because, if you asked me to name 2 Democrats who had the courage to do the right thing when it mattered most, I'd name you 2.
It's a nice, positive, unified note to end on, but I do want to give each of you an opportunity to direct people watching to more information about your candidacy. Cenk, why don't we start with you? Where can people find out more?
Yeah, cenkforamerica.com is my site, and we're now doing a number of events in Arizona, Florida to fight back against some of these injustices, and we need your help. So check out events. Of course, we would love your donations. We need that to power all of our campaigns, but also volunteers in every way you can. And yes, I'm an aggressive fighter, so I also, since my name is hard to spell, I also bought BidenIsGoingToLose.com, and that redirects to my site. And so that one's easy to remember. BidensGonnaLose.com or cenkforamerica.com. But guys,
wait, are you kidding me? Dean24.com is just it's just an Act Blue website. This is literally just like the most. This is like right off the shelf.
Stream was a nice surprise after a weird day. Thanks for the little victory.
Oh, 10-letter name. Thank you for the 3 gifted tier 1 subs. Why was your day weird? If you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to, obviously.
This is the election of our lifetimes. We all have to work together to make sure that we have the strongest possible candidate against Trump.
Representative Phillips, where can people find out more about your candidacy?
Dean24.com. And let me just make one appeal to everybody watching right now. Vote in the primary. The most beautiful thing about this election is we don't need a president. We don't need a Congress. We don't need an act of God. All we got to do is get out and vote. And the sad truth is both parties, they don't want you to vote in the primary. They only want you to vote in the general election. They want to choose the candidates that we have to choose from in the general. So if you want to move the needle, encourage your friends and your family, knock on doors, make phone calls, send postcards. If we don't vote in the primaries, we have completely handed the keys to the very people that we all know are taking democracy from both sides. I just want to thank you all. So dean24.com. Keep the faith, keep in touch, spread a little bit of love and spread a little bit of hope because we're coming and can't wait to meet you all.
We're comers.
Marianne, I'd like to close with you.
Thank you. People can find out more. People can sign up to volunteer. People can donate at Marianne 2024. And please remember that the machine does not want you to think that Cenk or Dean or I have any relevance whatsoever. I know in my case, complete invisibilization, erasure from conversations. Know that in conversations that they have, they act like the president doesn't even have any opponents. This is very, very wrong. There's a political media industrial complex. You know, I am beating all of the Republicans who are on the stage tonight. I have higher poll numbers. What is for Nikki Haley considered a surge, in my case, just dismissed, not even discussed. We can't just accept this as Democrats. I agree with Dean and Cenk about all of this. I don't believe the president is the strongest candidate. And when people say about me or about Dana or Cenk, oh, well, they can't win. No, President Biden can't win in the general. So don't go saying who can win in the primary, because as Dean said, if you show up to vote, we'll show them who can win. What they're doing is not right. It's not good for democracy. It's not right. Stand up now. Do more than vote in that primary. Figure out which of us you really think should be the one standing up against Donald Trump in 2024. And whoever that is, help us so that we can do everything possible to win in 2024.
Yeah, honestly, compared to like 2016 and 2020, or not, maybe was she in the 2016? I think she was in the 2016. She's gotten her act together. She's a bit more of a seasoned campaigner. But that being said, like she is the most serious person here. Frankly, she wasn't in 2016. She was just 2020. Gotcha. She's the most serious person here. Like, unironically, like she actually has. I mean, she's actually polling, for one thing. Yeah, I mean, just as a point of reference, for this most recent poll, Dean Phillips got 6% of support among Democrats, while Biden brought in 77%, and Williamson brings in 8%. Cenk gets 2%. I mean, like... yeah, like, again, she has the best shot of all three of these, but even if you pooled all three of them together, it would still be like 16% of the Democratic voter base. But she has a much better grasp on the rhetoric, and, like, she's much more able to kind of paint a picture of what her presidency would be like, you know?
And help repair this country and create a new beginning.
Marianne, Representative Phillips, Cenk, thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate it. And for all of you watching out there, it's been a pleasure hosting this forum. You know, knock on wood, hopefully we can do this again in the future. Thank you all for watching, and I will give you one last appeal. If you've enjoyed this content, would like to become a TYT member for a year at a fairly steep discount, you can go to tyt.com/annual to get the information about that. I've been John DeRola. I will see you tomorrow on The Damage Report. Everyone, have a good night.
I want to talk just a little.
Nope. I am really tired, and I did a 5-hour stream, 4-hour stream earlier today. One number between 5 and 4, and I'm exhausted. If you've enjoyed my stream of minimal talkingness, you should hit the follow button and the subscribe button and like the stream, and also consider dropping some subs or donos. 4-hour stream. Have a good night. I'll do my best. I'm just I'm just so sleepy. Just a little eepy, chat. It's almost like I worked all day, took a break to eat dinner, and then worked some more. Certainly like that. 10-letter name, thank you for showing up. Thank you for the support. I know this isn't an ideal content stream, but we'll be back tomorrow, and I'll have more content for you, and I'll be a little bit more on the ball. And I'll be in my main location, so that'll be cool, and maybe I'll dress up in like a cool slutty outfit or something. Who knows? We'll have to find out. All right, y'all have a good one. We're gonna raid over into Doodleburb, who's playing some Minecraft, and y'all be nice to that burb, okay? Good night, y'all. Burr.